when you go back and you look at the history of hip hop itself, the whole culture itself, I think it falls right in line with science and scientists, right?
Yep.
Because the basis of being a scientist is to experiment, right? So what's going to happen if I combine this liquid with this solid, or what's going to happen if I do X, Y, and Z? That's the same thing Cohort did, right? He said,
Yes.
okay, I noticed that when I play these records, a certain portion when the break beat comes on, that's when people, get more turned up. So what's going to happen if I combine these beats together? What's going to be the reaction? What's going to be the chemical reaction for me putting these elements together? And that's the same thing that we do with science. You look at,
Yep.
what, they speak about, Flash, working on the mixer,
Mm-hmm.
manipulating the mixer to do certain things. That's
Mm-hmm.
all science. So I think,
Yep.
it's just naturally that these worlds come together.
That's
You
right.
know,
That's right.
you know,
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head, brother, because that's exactly what it is, right? That's what
yeah,
science is. It's trying new things, seeing what works. You know what I'm saying? And going with it if it works. And if it don't work, you try something different, right? Like that's
exactly,
what it is. That's what it is.
exactly,
And
exactly,
and,
exactly.
and I think it's a lot of us fail to realize or recognize how much hip hop culture has led to new inventions, right? Like, I
Hmm.
mean, the sound mixer, right?
Malik's First Job Podcast, here to answer any questions that y'all ask. Financial literacy and resources. Parents and young people becoming bosses. CEOs, future leaders, entrepreneurs. Conferences and boardrooms getting sponsors secured. If you want generational wealth, Brooklyn's own Kerwin Phillip with information to help. Malik's First Job Podcast. Malik's Podcast. Brooklyn's own Kerwin Phillip. Kerwin Phillip. Malik's First Job Podcast. Podcast. Brooklyn's own Kerwin Phillip. Generational wealth.
Peace, peace, peace. How you doing? This is Kerwin Phillip again with another episode of the Malik's First Job Podcast, where we talk about leadership, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy. So today, in the great words of the legendary poet Craig G from the legendary Juice Crew, today we're going to be dropping science, right? I got my man here, Dr. Andre Samuel from the Citizen Science Lab, right? He does a lot of great work involving young people and the sciences, dealing with STEM and STEAM and everything along those lines. So we can go ahead and introduce, Dr. Andre Samuel. And, thank you for coming on to the Malik's First Job Podcast.
Hey, what's good? What's good? Kieran, thank you for having me. What's good in the science hood? I'm glad to be here, yo.
No doubt, no doubt. So please tell people your background and who you are and what you do.
Sure. So, I'm a little kid from DC. I was raised and grew up in Washington DC, Northwest, Adams
Okay.
Morgan. Had the chance to, grow up in a city where I saw things were obtainable. I saw that there were Black doctors and dentists and lawyers and people who worked in government and stuff like that.
Right.
And I've always been sort of like this nerdy, like sort of science kid. So I've always enjoyed that. And basically, what I've done is I've turned that into a career where, I ended up becoming a biologist and a research scientist. And I worked on research projects that involved vaccine development for like hookworms and parasites. I worked on research where we studied tuberculosis in non-human primates, or monkeys, as we commonly like to call them. I've done a lot of research work, and what I decided to do was create a nonprofit called the Citizen Science Lab, which is focused on getting more Black and Brown kids interested in the sciences and trying to help them realize that science is a viable way to economic mobility for our community, but also to kind of help them avoid a lot of the sort of mistakes or maybe even issues that I had growing up.
Okay.
So even though I've always been into science and love science, it wasn't like a straight shot for me. I battled drug addiction and homelessness in between all of this,
Okay.
and dealt with a lot of trauma as a kid. So I wasn't, even though I knew what I wanted to do, I wasn't really ready or able to obtain it because I had so much that I had to deal with. But then once I got through all of that, right, and I got to this point where I created this nonprofit, I was able to look at my story and say, hey, now I can use my story to help more kids from our communities to help accomplish and achieve some really amazing things in science. So yeah, that long story short, I guess that's my background and in a nutshell, who I am and what I do.
Okay, that's what's up. So what was the initial spark that got you interested into science as a kid?
Wow. I think it was just curiosity. Like I always wanted to know how things worked. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember things like you always hear about power lines. Don't touch a power line. Don't touch a power line, right? Like they'll shock you. And then I remember seeing birds like hanging and sitting on the power lines. And I'm like, why can't the birds get electrocuted and why are we getting electrocuted, right? And so I would actually look up books. Back then we didn't have the internet, so we had to go to the library. But I would go and look into libraries and find books about birds and try to figure out why or how they were able to, sit on these power lines without getting electrocuted. And just things like that, like how do trees grow? Why do the leaves fall? Why do they change colors? That was just sort of how I always wanted to, how my mind was always working. Yeah. So it was just
Okay.
always a natural sort of inclination, Unfortunately, I wasn't the best behaved kid in school.
You like the class clown?
Oh, was I, dude? Oh my God, right? Like I would be like in pottery class, and that's how science kind of gets you in trouble, right? So I realized, oh, the clay is wet. So I'll throw it up in the ceiling, and if it's wet, it'll eventually dry, and when it dries, it'll lose its adhesiveness to the ceiling and eventually fall down on somebody, right? So
Right.
so doing that kind of stuff, right? And always getting in trouble, but I was a smart kid. I always, was able to grasp my material fairly easy. But my teachers would be like, all right, you won't stop talking or you won't stop acting like a clown in class. So I'm taking 10 points off, and this and
Right.
that. So yeah, my grades suffered. I
So
wasn't
do
an
you,
A student straight through, yeah.
so do you think people often see like the kids that kind of act up in class or act out? Was it a situation where you were bored in class because things were so easy for you?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I'm gonna be honest. I think it was a combination of both,
Yeah.
of multiple things, right? Yeah, I was bored. I like to do things with my hands.
Hmm.
And even though I love science, right, there's but so much reading and testing that you can do to even
Right.
keep that sort of interest going. So we didn't do experiments and stuff like that. The classes, I might be digressing a little bit, I'm sorry, but the classes that I did really, really well in were the classes that I had a hands-on component to. So
Okay.
graphic arts, and we're talking old school graphic arts where you had to go down with the T-square and the tape
Right.
and line up the border and then cut out letters and line it up, right? Like that kind of stuff, and then turn it
Yeah.
on the printing press. That kind of stuff. Pottery, like I said, photography. I took sewing. You know what I'm saying? Like I took sewing. The first time I took sewing, I took it because there was this really fly girl in the class, and I was like, "Yo, if I
That's
take
always
this
a story.
class, if I take this class, I might be able to holler." No, I was not able to holler. She wasn't trying to do. She wasn't trying to see me at all. But I know
Right.
how to make a pin cushion and a pair of shorts, so I'm good.
Okay.
Right. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much what it was like, growing up. I was, I did what I could while I was in school, but I was bored. I like to do things with my hand, and I had my own issues as a kid. Right?
Okay.
I was abandoned by my biological mom. I was abandoned by my father, my biological father. I was adopted by a single black woman who was actually his wife at the time that me and my sisters were conceived, right? So, and then I was raised by her, and then we were broke, we were poor. So I had issues, right? So I would act out not only out of boredom, but because I'm like, yo, I'm dealing with issues from my parents and home and background and stuff like that.
Right.
So, not knowing how to deal with that, I think,
Okay.
was hard for me. But what it has done is it made it easier for me to understand our kids when they
Right.
come through the classroom door or when they're dealing with issues and they're acting out. You realize it's not personal. You
Mhm.
know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? They got something going on and they're just not
Yeah.
quite sure how to deal with it. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah. 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 I remember when I was, 'cause I taught in the classroom for a short amount of time. And I remember going in, I had like one idea of what I thought the classroom environment was going to be like. But then once I got there, I realized, oh, I got to wear like 20 different hats inside this classroom,
right.
because, the kids, 'cause I thought I'm just going to come in there, provide instruction, kids are going to listen, and, everybody goes home happy ever after. But coming in, and I started realizing that kids come to school with trauma, you know, because you don't know what goes on outside the classroom. But of course, they spend the majority of their time in school, so that's the environment where they're going to express themselves and let out whatever issues are taking place outside. And you have, let's say, 20, 30 kids in the classroom. That's 20 or 30 different personalities you got to try to manage and juggle and figure out, and be
Hmm.
teacher, counselor, you
Hmm.
know, parent, mentor, and all other titles you could think of.
Right,
So
right, right. And
so I
20
say,
different home environments you got to deal with, right? Like that's true too, right? Like 20. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yep,
yeah. I
yep,
hear you. You know, sometimes we have students that come into the lab,
hmm
and as engaging as the lab is, right? We will occasionally have that student who wants to put their head down and go to sleep.
hmm
And a lot of educators, I think, will think, particularly educators who aren't familiar with how sometimes things work in our community, right? But
yeah,
they're like, oh, he's always sleeping. He never pays attention. He doesn't want to pay attention. But if you sit down and talk to some of these kids, you realize, oh, I can't get any sleep because there's always noise in the house, or somebody's
mhm,
always up, right? Or
yeah,
I can't get any sleep because mom works at night and I got to watch the kids
right,
during the night. So lots of different reasons. Like I can't get any sleep because I ain't eat last night, and it's hard to
yep,
sleep on an empty stomach.
yep,
So I think that we have to understand that as educators, we have to realize, just like you said, there are all these different personalities, and we have to
mhm,
learn to educate from a place of compassion and
yep,
understanding. You know what I'm saying? Rather
yep,
than this sort of, this is how it goes and this is how it should go. You do this, you do that, and this is the
hmm
way it goes, and there's no other way. Like you got to learn how to adjust, and that's
yep,
hard to do when you got 20 different people in the class. But that's what has to be done, I think. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I remember one time, I was in a class. I was teaching like economics and personal finance, and there was student. Like I guess I don't know if the kid went to the school, but it was a young man in the community that got killed. Right?
Mm,
And the kids in
mm,
the class knew him. And matter of fact, one of the kids that was in the classroom was on the phone with him, FaceTiming. He FaceTimed him like right before he ended up getting killed. He was
mm,
like, "Yeah, I'm gonna run inside the store. I'm gonna call you right back." And he
mhm.
never called the young man back.
Man,
And that's when he got killed. And of course, I'm supposed to be in there teaching, but these kids are in there, telling stories and pretty much expressing themselves and going, kind of letting out their you know their experiences with the young man and just releasing emotions. And I was like, you know what? I'm not teaching today. I'm just
right.
let y'all do y'all thing. I'm gonna sit here quiet and let y'all talk.
That's right.
Because
That's right.
that's their form of therapy is kind of let that stuff out.
Yeah.
Whereas you may have had another teacher be like, "Oh, y'all need to be quiet and focus on the lesson," but the kids can't focus on what you're trying to teach because they got all this other stuff going on that it's pretty much it's not your me teaching about investing or savings. That's not on their mind right now.
Right now,
They
nope.
just lost a friend.
Yep. Yep.
We have to think
Yep.
about that.
And they're
You know,
probably thinking, sometimes some of them could be thinking, why even worry about investing right now when
yeah,
it's just a matter of time before my ticket is punched? You know what I'm
exactly.
saying? Like that's a attitude and a mentality that we have to counter and make sure that we are having them understand that no, that's not the case, right? Like
Mhm.
like this does not have to be the ending for you.
Exactly.
But nah, you're absolutely right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I know you spoke about, I guess, some of the trauma that you faced. Now I know, I guess, as you got older, you wasn't always Dr. Andre Samuel, right?
Right,
There was
right.
there's other stories and other challenges you had to overcome to get to where you are now. Can
Mhm.
you kind of speak about that, like in your early adult years, some of the stuff you dealt with?
Oh yeah, sure, sure. I mean, as a young adult, right, like in my
Mhm.
20s, I think I struggled a lot with sort of self-identity and
Mhm.
like uh, just I sort of accepting self-identity in a sense, right? Like I like to say at times, like I grew up at a time where being light skinned wasn't cool unless you were Al B. Shore or like Prince, right? Like right. So I'll probably give I just gave my age away too. So,
Okay.
so, but I think that I had abandonment issues. I had self identity issues. I went to Tuskegee University straight out of high school.
Okay.
I was a pre-vet major. I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Mhm.
Prior to that, I'd worked at like pet shops and veterinary clinics and stuff like that. So I knew what I wanted to do. But then when I got there, I had a couple of challenges. One, I didn't know how to study all my subjects, right? So there
Okay.
were some subjects I did really well in, but then there were other
Mhm.
subjects where it was just a significant challenge because I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to study math. I didn't know how to
Mhm.
study um, chemistry, which involved a lot of math, right?
Right.
I thought all I had to do was learn principles and then I could regurgitate them on the test. I didn't realize that I had to like, you know, practice problems over and over and over and over and over and over again to get that. So
Yeah.
I got there, I struggled a little bit. And then, like I said, I was broke. So I decided that I was going to get into a circle of white collar crime while I was down there.
Okay.
And I started writing bad checks and selling fake IDs on campus and all that stuff, right? And
Right.
I eventually got caught
Right.
and had to, deal with a court case. I actually ended up getting pleading out to a felony,
Right.
right. So I pled out to a felony, and then after that, like it really kind of went like a downward spiral for me because I felt like my dreams were gone. There was no way for me out. I
Right.
basically started using drugs. I got addicted. Ended up losing my home, my job. I ended up being homeless for a stint, sleeping
Okay.
in abandoned buildings downtown DC, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, all that for a couple years.
Mm.
And then I got to a point where I was tired of living that life
Okay.
and checked myself into a detox program. Took two
Wow.
times. I checked in once. I was like, no,
Okay.
that didn't stick. Checked in the second time. I was like, all right, I think this is it, right? Like this is it.
Mhm.
And then that was when I started my path to self healing and recovery and ended up going back to school. I transferred my credits from Tuskegee to the University of the District of Columbia, which is another HBCU in DC. Most people think there's only one, which is Howard.
Right.
And I got lots of love for Howard. My son goes to Howard, right? Like so HU.
Right.
But there are two HBCUs in DC, and the second one is the University of the District of Columbia.
Mhm.
So I transferred there, finished my biology degree, and my mom was able to see me graduate, get married, and give her first grandbaby. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So I graduated, and then after that, my mom did pass away about 7 days after I finished my first degree,
Oh,
and
wow.
so I was able to deal with that trauma, and it kind of helped push me a little bit further. So I ended up going to George Washington University, where I worked on the hookworm vaccine.
Mhm.
Worked on a master's in genomics and bioinformatics there while I was there.
Mhm.
And then we moved to Pittsburgh, and that's where I did my PhD in biology and was able to, finish that. And then when I finished that, I was able to create and open up my own company and nonprofit, the Citizen Science Lab, immediately after.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it was a journey, yo. It was a
Yeah. Yeah. So, what was it that what was the trigger that made you say, I need to change what I'm doing? Like, what was that
oh
moment?
gosh, that was a good moment. Let's see. Well, I tell you what, the day that I decided that I couldn't do it anymore for the last time, I think I
Right.
had just gone off on a really bad binge. It was the night before Thanksgiving, if I'm not mistaken, and I was just like tired, Like I was really, really tired. I had been running through the streets at night. I had a gun to my head a few times. Um,
Hmm.
I had already like come within a few inches of losing my life out there, like a few times before that. and I felt like it was getting ready to happen again. So I ended up like calling my mom that day, like that morning I woke up. I don't even think I woke up because I think I've been up all night. So the sun comes up. I'm trying to find something to eat. I didn't realize it was Thanksgiving Day. So that's how far out I've been out, right? Like I didn't realize it was Thanksgiving. I'm like, wow, all the stores closed. I had a couple dollars. I was trying to go to like McDonald's or Wendy's to get something to eat. Oh, everything's closed.
Wow.
So I had a couple. Back then we had payphones. So,
Yeah.
so I had some change. Hopped in the payphone, called my mom, and she was like, "Come on home, baby." I came home, and then that night I checked myself into a detox. And
Wow.
that was
Wow.
it. That was it. Yeah.
Wow. Gotta say salute to you, man. Salute.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank
Yes, I gotta give you that respect. So I guess after I guess you overcame the addiction and started to get yourself together. So how did you get started with what led to you starting the Citizen Science Lab?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. All right. So all right, that's a good question. So when I was in my Ph.D. program, right? First of all, I'm the only Black person in the program, right?
Wow.
So and we're in a university that is sitting in the heart of Pittsburgh downtown, and right next to a predominantly Black, under-resourced neighborhood, right? So during my first summer there, I noticed that like these awesome laboratories that we have in the biology department are sitting empty throughout the whole summer. Nobody's using it. Maybe one summer class that comes in for 2-3 weeks. That's it, right?
Right.
And I was like, why aren't we reaching out to some of the kids in the neighborhood during the summer and saying, hey, why don't you come up on campus, see what campus is like, and then come do some science? So I was able to go ahead and reach out to some faculty members and say, this is what I want to do. Can I do like a little summer program for 1 week where we bring the kids up? This was a lot easier to do. This was prior to, the whole Penn State fiasco. So we were able to get some kids up on campus with little to, any issues. And what happened was every summer, we had all these kids, all these young brothers and sisters that came from, downtown and from the Hill District that would come to the lab and they would do science experiments. We wouldn't do nothing else. No lecture, you know what I'm saying? No testing, no nothing. Just come and do the science experiments. And these kids came back every summer the entire time that I was doing my PhD. It took me 6 years to finish my PhD. So the faculty, one of the faculty members that helped me get this started said, hey, what you're doing here is looking really good. You should keep doing this when you're done. And they were able to get like a $500,000 grant.
Okay.
And when I graduated and finished my PhD, they turned over that $500,000 grant to me and said, hey, go create this thing that you need to create. And that was the blessing of how I got the Citizen Science Lab started. It was, I think the important message here is I was doing something that I wasn't getting paid for.
Right.
And I was passionate about it. And I didn't realize anybody was watching me. Right. But somebody watched me and saw what I was doing and said, hey, we should invest in this and make it bigger and larger. So I think the message there is for all of us is like, to always put our best foot forward into whatever it is that we're doing, because you never know who's watching. And
Exactly.
the opportunity I have today is through the blessings of my higher power, God, whoever you want to call him or her. But also, he worked through the power of observation, and somebody watched what I was doing and said, let's hand this Black man $500,000 and see what he can do with it.
Right.
So yeah, that's how we came about, man, and it's been a blessing ever since.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that, I guess, when you were in school, that you were the only, person of color or African American in that, in the class, and I guess you saw that there was a population close to, where you were going to school of, young African American youth that you want to expose to the sciences, right? Now, how important is that, to because because this is like an area that's not often spoken about within our community, right?
That's
We
right.
see
That's
the,
right.
and I hate to say the stereotypical stuff, the athletes, the musicians, and so on. Of course, we kind of talk about doctors and nurses and lawyers and accountants, but we don't speak about scientists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And knowing our history, when you go back to ancient cultures, Egypt, Sumeria, we were the scientists, we were the doctors, and
right.
these different people that kind of help civilize the planet and help bring education to the planet. But now, in the time that we're in now, you don't see that many people that look like us in the laboratories, doing things like that. So why is it so important for us to kind of expose our kids to this information?
Yeah, so it's extremely important for a couple of reasons. It's extremely important to expose our kids to sciences and science possibilities and career possibilities in the science for a lot of different reasons. One, and primarily, is we are extremely underrepresented, right? So if you look at the National Survey of Earned Doctorates, which is put out by the National Science Foundation, I think once every few years, what they've been doing is they've been tracking the number of PhDs that have been handed out in America. And you can see that there's a steady underrepresentation of Blacks when it comes to sciences, the sciences and PhDs handed out in sciences. We only make up about 2 to 3% of those PhDs, right? There, if I'm not mistaken, about last year, I think there were like 55,000 PhDs handed out.
Okay.
Right? And I think we got like 200 or something like that, right? So, I mean, it's a really, really, really low number. And we're seeing other minorities actually starting to go past us, even though they're underrepresented. We're starting to see that our group of people is starting to dwindle underneath. So your Latinx population is starting to grow like in the 8 to 10% range. Okay. Right? I think the only one that's worse than us and is significantly dwindling is Native Americans. Native Americans are, I mean, it is tragic how low those numbers are when it comes to the number of Native Americans that are pursuing it. But it's very important for those reasons, because if you have more diversity in the science workforce, then you also have more diversity of ideas and more diversity of solutions. You also have a group of people who are able to focus on diseases and issues within their own community, right? Like, so we have our own issues, we have our own health disparities, we have our own problems. So if we have our own scientists, then we have more people working on the front for us to help us out, right? Because scientists tend to be passionate about things that hit home a little bit more, right? Like I'm passionate about science education. Science education hits me, right? It hits me at home because I want more Black and brown kids. If you have a scientist that is really passionate, let's say, about the use of Delta 8 in our community and how it's only targeted to like poor and underserved neighborhoods, then that scientist is going to be passionate about it and do some significant research. You don't see any white people running around talking about let's do testing on Delta 8 and see how bad it is, because it's not really in their neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't find that in the affluent neighborhoods. The people who are selling that are living in those neighborhoods, and they're opening up stores in our neighborhoods to sell it because it's unregulated. So these are the kinds of things I think that address or will address some of the disparities that we have in healthcare and in the sciences. The other reason is it's economic mobility, right? Like, I mean, I'm making a pretty comfortable living as a scientist, right? And you can make a pretty comfortable living from all levels of science, right? Like, you don't have to have the PhD to be comfortable in this field, right? But there are a lot of different levels, a lot of different places where we can fit in the world of research and science and biomedical research. So it's lucrative, and we're underrepresented, and it makes sense, right? And I think that it's important for us to realize that, like, we were talking earlier, like sports, music, entertainment is not the only way out for us. And then when we start talking about academics when we start talking about medical school and becoming lawyers and nurses and dentists, that's all good and well too. But we also need researchers. We need scientific researchers, people who go into the laboratory and address an actual problem that affects us and our people, our culture, and to go in and do that science. That's what we need.
Wow. I know trying to reach and expose our children to this field. I remember we met at the Hip Hop Ed conference early this year, right, in New York, and we was in the session with with Jay Rawls and John Robinson, right, having the hip hop mentality. So I know you incorporate hip hop,
Mhm.
In a lot of your curriculum. Can you speak to that and how you use that to help draw the kids in and help them engage?
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, happy 50th anniversary to hip
Yes.
hop and the music we love, right? Like
Yes.
um that's dope. So yeah, it's very important to me, I think, to keep that element, right? I grew up on it. It is, I grew up loving science, but I also grew up loving hip hop.
Mhm.
I think it's important for us to understand as a people that hip hop and hip hop culture was full and fueled by innovators. And people, I look at them not just as musicians, but I look at them as scientists, right?
Yes.
Like to hear and see some of the stuff that we learned about hip hop culture and graffiti culture when we were there was phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the things that I do to keep it alive is I like to name some of our programs, a lot of our programs after old school, hip hop artists or things that are related to hip hop. So we have a program called the Ice-T Project, which is named after, rapper and actor extraordinaire Ice-T, right, back in the day. And that stands for Integrating Computational and Experimental Technologies, all right? So the Ice-T Project, what do we do? Well, what we do is we teach our kids how to build batteries that are powered by bacteria and mud, okay? And then we teach them how to computer code and use biosensors to collect data on those batteries. And then we say, okay, now that you know how to do this, go build something, right? Go build something that's powered by the batteries. So that's the Ice-T Project. We have the Escape Project. The Escape Project is named after the old school R&B group Escape, right?
Okay.
We have the BDPs. Those are our biodome projects. These are like little lending libraries, but instead of books, they have little science kits that you can put in them and share with the neighborhood and share with your community. And then you could refill the science kits with like common household items like straws, paper clips, stuff like that, right? Very easy, fun stuff to do. That's a nod to Boogie Down Productions, right?
Yeah.
BEP. So those are the kinds of things that we do. We just created a program that we're going to be running in the fall called Microbeats. And so
Okay.
that is using microbiology fused with hip hop and then fused with AI. So we're using microbiology and hip hop as a way to teach AI to our community and get them involved in the community. We went to, the Hip Hop Ed conference was phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
It was a phenomenal conference because you saw so many people who had the same philosophy that you had as far as bringing hip hop culture in as a way to teach. It was good to see because I feel like a lot of people don't understand the need and the necessity of being able to bring this culture into the classroom. And so we do that, right? We do that. We try to bring the culture into the classroom. We try to do it on social media. We try to make sure that our posts are connected to old school hip hop. We throw an annual hip hop conference. Concert, right? So just this year, about 3 weeks ago, we had Slick Rick come in and perform at our block party, right? And all we did was like a whole bunch of science experiments, and then we had a stage, and then we had Slick Rick perform. Last year we did Masters of the Mic, and we had Slick Rick, Big Daddy Kane, we had Rakim, we had DJ Jazzy Jeff, Positive K. All of them come in and do like a big showcase, right? So we make sure that we keep the culture alive within the organization, and we make sure we keep the culture alive within naming our programs.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think when you go back and you look at the history of hip hop itself, the whole culture itself, I think it falls right in line with science and scientists, right?
Yep.
You know, because the basis of being a scientist is to experiment, right? So what's going to happen if I combine this liquid with this solid, or what's going to happen if I do X, Y, and Z? That's the same thing Cohort did, right? He said, okay, I noticed that, you know, when I play these records, a certain portion, you know, when the break beat comes on, that's when people, you know, get more turned up. So what's going to happen if I combine these beats together? What's going to be the reaction? What's going to be the chemical reaction for me putting these elements together? And that's the same thing that we do with science. You look at, you know, what, you know, they speak about, you know, Flash, you know, working on the mixer, you know, manipulating the mixer to do certain things. That's all science. So I think, you know, it's just naturally that these worlds come together.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, brother, because that's exactly what it is, right? That's what science is. It's trying new things, seeing what works. You know what I'm saying? And going with it if it works. And if it don't work, you try something different, right? Like that's what it is. That's what it is.
Exactly.
And I think it's a lot of us fail to realize or recognize how much hip hop culture has led to new inventions, right? Like, I mean, the sound mixer, right, was created out of the need and the creation of hip hop, right? Like it was, we needed a way to blend and engineer our sounds a lot better than the way that we've been using it. So that led to the invention of you know, the mixer, the invention of the turntables, right? The turntables used to be just something you played records on. It evolved from that one single record player to the 2 turntable deck that we now see with all the buttons and all everything. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, come on. Absolutely, brother. Yeah.
Yes. So what kind of reaction do you get out the kids? Like, are they really truly engaged? You know, have you had children that been a part of your program that moved on to the next level of science?
Yeah. Look, the kids are engaged for sure, right? It is the kids are engaged. They come back year after year until they finish high school. Some of them start with middle school and they go till they finish middle school, and then they go till they finish high school. It's hard to not be engaged in a program where you're going to take a 3D printer, you're going to break down the 3D printer, and you're going to rebuild it to a 3D printer that can now 3D print living body parts, right? Like arteries and heart valves. That's one of our programs. How can you not be engaged in that, right? So I would say yes, like they are engaged. And we are very, very, very lucky that we've been in this game long enough where now I just hired 2 former participants as full-time employees, right? So we got a young lady who grew up in Homewood. She came to us in high school. She finished high school. She went on to Howard. She just finished her bachelor's in biology at Howard in May, and we just hired her. She started like 2 weeks ago. So she's now a full-time staff, and she handles our alumni coordination, right? And handles some of our research projects. We have another young brother who is from the Hill District of Pittsburgh who came to us in high school. He just finished in May. He just finished his bachelor's of science in environmental science. And this young brother is now aboard and a full-time staff member with the organization, right? So it certainly works, and we're starting to see them like not only finish their degrees, and these are just 2 that we know of that we've brought back, but we see them now finishing their degrees and coming back or going to grad school. So it's been a phenomenal experience. We are starting to see, you know, the fruits of our labor. It's pretty awesome.
Dope. And what's the age group that your program targets?
Well, we target specifically middle through high school, but we serve all ages. We serve K through 12, and we also serve adults. We have adult programs that we do called like Science and Brews and stuff like that. When you come in, you can come in as an adult, 21 and older, have some drinks, or not if you know if you're not a drinker, but have some drinks and some beverages and do some
Right.
science, right?
Okay.
Like drunk science. You can't get no fun. You can't get no funner than
Right.
that. We're gonna blow up something and we're gonna have some drinks. Come on. It's not only for the West Virginians.
Right. That's pretty dope. That's pretty dope. Pretty dope. So do you have? I guess do you work within the school system, or like, are you like have a separate center where people come afterwards and come, to your site?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually have, we used to have two sites.
Okay.
We closed one during the pandemic. Um, and then, so we currently have one site that's operational. It's a big lab. It has about 5 different sites, 5 different laboratories in it. It's about 5,000 square feet. And it's really sort of like this hub and spoke model. So we have our site, but then we have all these different arms and spokes that go out to all these different schools, all these different organizations, community organizations that need a STEM component. We send our staff there, or they send their kids to us. If you are a school, public school, charter school, private school, we have people that go to their classes and conduct experiments, but we also have schools that bring their kids to us on a regular basis. So at any time, we have folks that are either being at the lab or out, out in the school somewhere. It's a very, very wide net that's sort of cast
Right.
across this region. Yeah.
Nice. And you're primarily in the Pittsburgh area. Right?
We're primarily in the Pittsburgh area. Yeah. We've been able to do some service and do a lot of things outside of the Pittsburgh area.
Mm-hmm.
We do professional development for universities. So we've done professional development for HBCUs like St. Augustine's University down in Raleigh, North Carolina. We've done work with local universities here, such as Duquesne University and the University of Pittsburgh. It really, as if you are an institution or individual that has a gap in your science and STEM programming, we are usually there and have a solution for you to be able to address that. So
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. So, any thoughts on expanding, like into other states?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So expanding is definitely part of the dream, right? So
Right.
we are currently expanding now within the city. So we are
Okay.
actually in the process of purchasing an old abandoned library in the Hill District. It's called the Martin Luther King Reading and Cultural Center.
Okay.
And we are about to purchase that and make that our headquarters. Once we have that headquarters established, our eyes are set on expanding outside of the
Okay.
Pittsburgh region. So Houston, San Diego, the Bay Area, Atlanta, Chicago, Detroit, Washington, D.C., even Raleigh. These are all places that we sort of Philadelphia. These are all places that we have on our map as far as expanding and areas that have a need for our services. So once we get the MLK Center up and running, in about a year or two, the plan is going to be next to find our next city to
Hmm.
expand to.
Right. So it seems like you already have a list of target areas that you want to focus in on, right? So what
Yeah.
did you identify as the need that's prompting you to want to say, okay, I want to target Houston, I want to target Atlanta, I want to target DC?
Sure. So first of all, for me, I'm targeting places where our beautiful people are living
Okay.
and have the majority of the population there, I think, or a large part of the population. But then
Right.
also cities that have a viable biomedical or research hub. So Houston has a huge biomedical research and healthcare hub. Atlanta does as well, right? Washington D.C. does as well. So Detroit also is an up and coming area and is going through its changes. But you also have a medical industry there that people can go into. And then we're also talking about places where there's need, right? So
Okay.
I mean, Atlanta is a very affluent area for African Americans. But while we have a lot of medical doctors, we don't have that many research scientists, and you certainly don't have that many research scientists teaching on the university level or at the academic level, right? So
Okay.
that kind of goes back to another reason why we need more diverse scientists, because our scientists are not only doing the research and creating cures, they're also teaching the future scientists of tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And so if we're going to start getting more Black kids in the sciences, we should have more Black instructors teaching them, right? Or being
Right.
there available for them. So yeah, once we get that up and running, I think we'll be ready to expand. And the dream of choosing these cities that we know have a need for us
Right.
is where we plan on expanding. Yeah.
Dope. Dope.
And I'll be honest, I had this list from day one. Like I was like, all right, I know Pittsburgh, we're gonna start in Pittsburgh, but from day one, I was like, after Pittsburgh gets settled, we're gonna go here, here, and here.
Wow. No, I think that kind of speaks on the importance of visualization, right? Seeing
Yeah.
things before it happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because how long ago was it when you wrote that list down?
Oh, that was back in 2014.
2014, almost close to 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah,
And now I guess you're on the cusp of it actually happening.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
It's kind of wild, right? Like to think that one, not only have I created my own company and organization,
Mhm.
but it really feels like it's about to become this institution, which
Right.
is very different than I think, a company or a startup. I mean, once you get to the point of institution, you have, you know, you've made some significant strides and accomplishments, I think, as far as your company is concerned. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited, more so excited about all the different lives we're going to be able to touch
Yes.
when we open these places up. So,
Yeah. I speak about this often. It's the importance of exposure,
yeah,
right? The importance of exposure, because I do like a lot of financial literacy. And I remember doing a workshop not too long ago, and I was speaking about, investing in stocks. And it was to, some young people that were in a population that normally people don't come and speak about investing in stocks to these group of kids. But I'm like, wow, I'm standing here as I was in the moment, I'm like, this is going to change the perspective,
hmm
it's going to change the trajectory and the future for these young people. Now, everybody there may not get it, but I know at least one or two kids may pick up on it and then do something with it. But and that's still the impact,
right,
right? That's still the importance.
yeah,
So, so it's the same thing with what you're doing, because as you said earlier, the science aspect is not always taught in our community, and
hmm
people don't know about it because they never heard of it, right? It
right,
was never introduced. It was never introduced to them, and the fact that you're taking steps to introduce this career choice lets them know it's possible,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
changes the paradigm. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so it's very
That's all we're
important.
trying. Yeah, that's all we're trying to do, right? Is just provide an alternate way of life, and say, hey, if you like this, you could go this route, and you
Yeah,
certainly have the ability, right? Because that's the other thing is like so many times we as a people are led to believe or felt to believe that the sciences is not a space for us,
right.
right? That it's not where it wasn't created for us, and it wasn't. But as far as the American institution of science and how we know it today, was not created for us. It was
Right.
created for the white male, by the white male, and manipulated and controlled for many years by the white male. So, we know that it wasn't created for us here in the United States, but we know that we are quite capable of getting
Yeah.
in there and doing what we need to do. I think a lot of us forget that the COVID vaccine, first viable COVID vaccine, right, was
Hmm.
created by who? A Black woman, right?
Right.
Right. Dr. Kizzy Corbett, right? Created. She was the one that worked on that vaccine, and we need more people like her from
Yes.
our communities to go in and save our lives and do the research that we need. I think that we have to remember as a people that the same time, travel, and money and distance that we put into getting our kids to basketball practice, soccer practice, baseball
Hmm.
practice, volleyball practice, football practice, right? Is the
Hmm.
same amount of energy that we can put into having our kids go to a science fair, a science class, a science camp, right?
Right.
Science after school program, because these are the ways that have are statistically shown to have a more viable way out through economic mobility than sort of throwing all your chances on a sport. I mean, the statistics just aren't sustainable. You know what I'm saying? It's great for the industry. You know what I'm saying? The people who are running the volleyball clubs, the basketball clubs, the football clubs, oh, they're making a killing. They're
Right.
making a killing. But the chances of your kid going through that, and every kid going through that, and making the same sort of lucrative or chances, having the chances of making a lucrative career or doing better through
Yeah.
sports, it's just not there. It's just
Yeah.
not there. Right?
Exactly.
Look at the numbers. So, yeah.
No doubt. So for people that want to get more information about, the Citizen Science Lab, and they want to find you on social media, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram, right? And so I'm at Dr. Afro, Dr.Afro_, and then the Citizen Science Lab, you can find us at the Citizen Science Lab. You can also find us online, www.thecitizensciencelab.org. You can find us on TikTok, X, as well as LinkedIn. Because I was about to say Twitter for a minute. I had to remember X.
Yeah, switched up on us.
Yeah. And you could probably, I think you can find us. What's the new one? Threads. You can find us on
Right.
Threads too.
That kind of, it shot up real quick, and now it kind of leveled out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yes. And any closing thoughts you want to share before we wrap up today?
Hey, look, just anybody watching this, go out and do amazing things. Don't get caught up in your head about what you can't and cannot get accomplished. Stay in your head about what you can accomplish, and don't let obstacles or life's mishaps get in your way. These are just sort of temporary hurdles that we have to get over. Keep your larger goal in mind, and you can get there. Hopefully, I can serve as that example when you get down and you're like, yo, I don't know if I can make it. And you remember, hey, Dr. Dre made it.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Not the Dr. Dre from your MTV Raps or the Dr. Dre from Death Row or the Aftermath. We talking about Dr. Dre from the Citizen Science Lab.
Right here. Like some of my friends will say, like the real Dr. Dre. Right? Dr. Dre with a degree. No shame to Dr. Dre. I mean, look, that's my intro song. Whenever I come in somewhere, I have somebody playing Dr. Dre so I can come in. Keep their heads ringing.
Dope. But thank you for taking the time to chat with us today, man. You got a remarkable story. You can't give up on our young people. You never know, what they may become. Despite what obstacles they're going through, they still got to be there to support them.
Absolutely.
Because you never know what great minds are out there.
That's
just
right.
waiting to flourish. So
that's right.
All right. So again, thank you for coming on, Doctor. And
you're welcome.
Thank you all
brother.
For tuning in.
Right? Yeah,
we'll
thank
catch
you for
y'all
having
next
me.
week. No
all
doubt.
Right. Good luck now.
Peace.
Generational wealth.